everyone, James from TeaDB here, bringing you a Inbetweenisode. It's been a while since I've done one, and I'm doing another one of my ripe episodes with a cake I've actually had for a long time, almost 7 years now, and it's a ripe tea. It's the 2010 Golden Needle White Lotus. I looked up my original Yunnan Sourcing receipt right before I filmed this episode, and I believe I bought it in May of 2013, back when this tea cost $46. It's a full 357 gram cake. And since then, I think this tea has just become a pretty popular tea amongst people. People like this tea, especially people in the West. And my experience with it when I first bought it in 2013 was that I really liked it too. It was one of my favorite ripe teas. I had it fairly often for a while, and then I just stopped drinking it. Eventually, we just got so overwhelmed with samples and stuff like that I really didn't make a habit of finishing off cakes. But one thing that's sort of happened is that as I've settled into different tea routines, I have started to drink ripe a lot more over the past few years, and those of you that follow closely know that. And so I've started to go back and finish off some of these cakes that I've had for quite some time. And ripe tea, I don't really do anything super special. I just kind of put it into a cabinet and just shove it in the back there. It's not a wood cabinet or anything like that. So the tea ends up being pretty dry stored, as I'm not humidifying it. But this tea has pretty much just been hanging out back there, and as I've come back to sort of revisit some of these teas in sort of the casual way that I do drink ripe, I do find that my opinion has changed, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst. But I was really curious to try this one because it's a tea that has a bit of a reputation. It's a Dayi tea, but it tends to go for a little bit higher price. It's known to be a pretty small leaf, very bud-heavy tea, high-grade tea. More expensive than, for instance, your numbered recipes like 7572, 7452, etc. But I'm drinking it in pretty much the exact same way I drink all the ripe. Here we go. So steep number 5 or 6 here. Cheers. And I'm going to get another steep going as well while I brew this. I'd say that this tea definitely sort of fits that really creamy brew, cream heavy. It's not super fruity, as Denny likes to call it. And I'd say it's sort of got a thinner. It's not like the most full-bodied tea. It's a little thinner in its focus, and I find that it does tend to reward in sort of more texture and things like that. The tea is actually kind of different from my memory. I definitely was brewing it quite differently when I had it originally, and I also remember it being very rich and very creamy. It's not quite as rich as my memory is, but it is still pretty rich. It has, I'd say, a lot of like the good aspects that you'd expect from like a really tip-heavy tea, that really rich creaminess. Gonna push this a little longer. I'm using about 9 grams, 250 milliliters here. So steep number 6 or 7, just a really casual sort of brew. And actually, I'm finding that this tea does not quite hold up as well compared with my memory. And my memory of it put it in a pretty lofty place, as it was my favorite ripe for probably my first year of drinking tea. That's interesting. And you could say, wait, maybe it's just how you stored the tea, maybe it's too dry or something like that. Could be true, but there are some teas that I've been pulling out from the back in a very similar situation to this that I found that I actually like more. It could also be the way I'm brewing it. Maybe a tea like this should be brewed in smaller vessels and that sort of thing, and quicker infusions or whatnot. But don't get me wrong, I'd still definitely enjoy this tea. I'd probably rank it a little bit above average as far as Dayi teas go. Do I find that it lives up to the price tag if you were to spend what it costs these days, which is around $70, $80 to get a cake? Not sure that it really does. I'm not sure that I would spend that money. I don't think it's necessarily way overpriced or anything like that. But I think you can find similar experiences, at least in other really tip-heavy teas. We know this is Dayi, so probably a lot of the material is coming from Menghai area. This one's a little woodier, a little heavier. The aroma is just starting to die off a little bit, so I'd expect to just get a few more infusions off of this. I'm going to let that cool down for just a second. Another nice thing about this tea is the wrapper is pretty cool looking. I'd say as far as wrappers go, it's sort of got this yellow goldish edge around it. Probably saw in the opening shot. It definitely gives the look of a more premium ripe tea than something that just says 7452 on the cover or anything like that. It's, yeah, I mean, it's and they charge the price to sort of for that reputation. So, but this compared to maybe some of their other special productions is one that they seem to do quite often. So my guess is that it's a pretty popular collector's item. In my really quick internet research, they originally made this tea in like the mid-2000s, and it was sort of like a loose production, and they eventually started to press it into the cake, I think, a year or two later. This one's a little more to my liking, a little bit thicker, a little bit woodier, a little bit of oiliness. The viscosity of it isn't quite as thin as the first steep I had. Definitely still some interesting textures. It's not as sweet as I feel like I remember. It's still pretty cream heavy, and it's still some sweetness to it, but it's not like the insane richness that I really remember. And it's possible that my memory is just dressed up a little bit, and the tea was never as good as I quite remembered it. But that's about where I put it. So gonna give this tea a 6.2 rating. It's a little bit above average as far as the dyes go. Definitely above average as far as the ripe goes. Would I pay this? Would I pay $46 for it? Sure. Would I pay $75, $80 for it? Not so sure. So that's about where I have it. Let me know how you guys like this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. I plan to bring on a bunch more ripes, including some that are in a very similar situation to this, including one that I really, really liked. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.